Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of William Taylor. This one got me like a proper murder mystery. So let's go. Sin and Tonic! A pink gin today and much nicer than last week, I will tell you, because last week was disappointing and I needed to make up for it, so I've made myself a gin cocktail. Gonna. Anyway, I'm so glad to be here up the shed with you tonight because it just feels like the world is heavy at the moment. It's heavy. So I feel incredibly grateful to be up here in my sanctuary doing something that I love. I feel really grateful for that today. Anyway, today's story. So we are going to be talking about somebody called William Taylor. Now, at the time of our story in 2018, he is 69, and William Taylor is a very wealthy farmer, landowner. It's like he had an enterprise. Is that the right word? An empire. I'm going to use that word. An empire. So it's like he had this empire that he'd built up. So he started with not very much and then built this big empire of like farming. So he owned a lot of land and multiple farms in the area, which, Sophie, where are we? We are in Gosmore in Hertfordshire. Gosmore. That doesn't sound very nice, does it? But it looks nice. It's very rural. And this is where William Taylor owns all of this land. So he is, like when I say wealthy, he's multi-millionaire. He was a very likeable fella. He was liked by most of the community, and I say most, but we'll get to that. Everyone would just say he was incredibly hardworking, very kind and nice and friendly. He was a friendly chap. For the rest of the video, I'm going to call him Bill because that was how he was known in the community, with his friends, with his family. So from now on, he's Bill. And he lived in a house called Harkness Hall. What a fantastic name for a house. Kind of scary though, but fantastic. He lived there. And it was a farmhouse on one of his farms. So he lived there with his wife, Angela. My voice, excuse me. The family situation was not that complex and not unusual, but so he was married to Angela and they'd been married for like 20 years. And with Angela, he had 3 children. And he had both Angela and himself, Bill, had been married before. So they'd been married previously and they had children from those other marriages. One of those children who features the most heavily in this story is called Richard. And that is Bill's son from his first marriage. I believe his eldest son from that marriage. He was incredibly close with Richard. Richard and Bill worked together a lot as well on the farms, and they would daily have a cup of tea, cup of coffee, slice of cake, biscuit at about 11 o'clock every day. And Richard would say that they worked really, really well together. So it was very nice situation. Sadly, in 2015, Angela and Bill would separate. So they'd been married for a long time, 20 years or more. And it was an amicable split. It sounds like Bill never stopped loving Angela. So it feels like the split was more instigated on her side. And he wasn't really keen. So he wouldn't divorce Angela. And I think he was still in love with her and he held on to the hope that they would reconcile. Rather than a divorce, they agreed on like a settlement. I don't understand all the legal stuff here. I don't know whether they wrote stuff down. I'm sure they did. I think it was an actual legal thing. But even without a divorce, Bill would hand over 2 of his farms to Angela. So she now owned 2 farms and she would live in a farmhouse on one of those 2 farms. So she took over the running of those farms as well. And I think like she was entitled to all of the profit that they made and stuff like that. I don't know the ins and outs, so take it with a pinch of salt. But basically it was very amicable and Bill wanted to make sure that she was okay and she's got like a house to live in and stuff like that. Richard knew that at this time it was quite crucial that he was around for Bill because he was heartbroken. Another friend as well, a close friend, Richard Lush. What a surname, Richard Lush. Another Richard, 2 Richards. This happens in my family because we've got like loads of Richards. I think there's 3 Richards in my family. Come along. Richard Lush would go round a few times a week to see his friend Bill, and he would take a home-cooked meal and they would eat together, and people really rallied around Bill. So much so that actually Richard Lush, his friend, I'm going to have to call him Richard Lush because there's another Richard, but I love the surname and I love saying the word, so I'm going to call him Richard Lush. He eventually moved in. So he moved into Harkness Hall with Bill and they became roomies, if you like, basically. Homies? No. That's not the term, is it? They lived together, Sophie, in Harkness Hall. Now that is lush. Oh! Serves me right, I choked on the gin. Oh, God. Let's scoot to the 3rd of June, 2018. That evening, Bill's grandson, one of his grandsons, took him a roast dinner. And they chatted, they talked about the farm, he ate his roast dinner. Oh, I love a roast dinner. That's my favourite meal ever. Sorry, anyway. So he ate his roast dinner, they had this chat, and then his grandson would leave. And I think he left at about 9 p.m. The next morning, on the 4th of June, Richard Lush had been away visiting, I think, relatives. I've made that up, I can't remember, and I didn't write it down, silly. He was away for the weekend, and he came back in the early hours on the Monday morning. Noticed, obviously it was quite late or early, that Bill had gone to bed. So his bedroom door was shut and he was like, oh, he's in bed. But it was unusual because there were dirty dishes in the sink. Bill was not that sort of chap. He was proactive, he was clean and tidy, and he wouldn't leave washing up. So it made Richard Lush feel uneasy a bit. So he went to bed. Maybe he thought that Bill was poorly and not his usual self, and that he'd had to take himself off to bed before he could wash the dishes, but he had this uneasiness. That uneasiness would grow because in the morning Richard Lush would get up at about 7 a.m, or before that, because I think he left at 7 a.m. He noticed that Bill wasn't up. The dirty dishes were still there, his bedroom door was still closed. Again, it just sort of could be as simple as Bill not feeling very well and that he needed to sleep, and that was what Richard Lush thought. At around 11 a.m. that same morning, Lush returned to Harkness Hall after visiting a friend, and the dishes were still there. There was post on the doormat, and now it's 11 in the morning, and he's like, okay. So now he goes upstairs. He needs to check on Bill. He goes upstairs and he opens his bedroom door. He has a knock, no answer. He goes in and he notices that Bill's bed has not been slept in. Not at all. Not a chance. His pyjamas are still like folded up on his bed, on his pillow or something like that. Like I said, he was neat, he was tidy, and so this was like unusual, and also unusual for Bill to be somewhere else and not have told Lush or anything like that. But Lush had been away, hadn't he? He had been away for the weekend, so he decided to ring Richard, his son, Bill's son. I so want to call him Richard the First because he was the first Richard that I spoke about. Shall I? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, so he called his son Richard and said, have you met for your coffee with your dad this morning? Because that was like clockwork. That was every morning. And Richard said, no, he didn't show up. I haven't seen him. Bill owned a lot of land and many farms. So the two Richards and other members of the family would search for Bill for the remainder of that day. Later that evening, Richard Lush, he decided that he was actually going to call the police and report Bill missing. The police began a missing persons investigation, and quite quickly things got spicy because it turned out that the week before Bill went missing, also I do strongly apologise if I do say anyone's name incorrectly. I did it last week. I called someone the wrong name for like 5 or 6 times. And when I edited, I was like, Soph, it upsets me because I don't like it. No. But obviously there's a lot of names and I'm very tired at the moment in the brain. So I do apologise if I do that. And if I notice it, I will write it on the screen and say, sorry, I'm a dick. But I apologise in advance, or retrospectively, if I've done it already, possible. Anyway. Totally forgotten what I was saying. Ringing a new. What was I saying? Richard 1, Richard 2, Richard 3, Richard 4. Me. There we go. Turns out the week before Bill's disappearance, his Land Rover, which was parked in a barn not far from the house, you know, like you have a farmhouse and barns and outbuildings and all that sort of business. He had a Range Rover or a Land Rover, one of those, a jeepy type farmy affair, that thing, in his barn, and it had been a victim to an arson attack. Someone had set it on fire, properly like burnt it out. Whoa. Now, that is spicy, isn't it? Because someone obviously doesn't like Bill, so all might not be as it seems. Has Bill really gone missing of his own accord? There was speculation amongst the villagers and the farm workers that the attack had been down to a local group of travellers, and that there had been some tensions between those travellers and Bill because he thought that they were on his land, like trespassing on his land, which happens, it does happen. So there was this assumption that that's what happened to the Jeep, Range Rover, Land Rover. He'd pissed off the wrong person, basically, and that they had given him a little warning. And apparently that is something that happens. Scary as hell, but apparently. Another unsettling discovery would soon be made, and that was by Bill's grandson. He found some links to a bracelet that Bill wore. He wore it every single day. So Bill suffered with arthritis, and I'll share a picture if I can, and it's like a kind of linked gold sort of looking bracelet thing. I've not seen one before for arthritis actually, and he would wear it all the time to help with his arthritis. And the grandson found some links to this bracelet that his granddad wore every single day in the barn, or outside the barn, outside the cowshed, you know, near Harkness Hall, so on his granddad's, near where he lived. So, I do apologise. Around the houses. Bill's grandson would call the police and tell them what he had found, and they came and they checked it out, and they actually found more links as well in and around the cowshed to that bracelet. The police were searching everywhere they could. There was a lot of land to cover. There was a lot of land of just Bill's alone, but also the surrounding village and things like that. They just didn't know. He'd just disappeared into thin air. The locals found it quite distressing because there were just a lot of police all of a sudden where they lived in their village, and they did that thing, you know, where they like stand in a big long line and then they comb. It's fascinating, isn't it? They sort of look like just an inch or so ahead of them, each of them, and they're just like searching for anything they can find, any clues, anything. Like, yeah, quite scary. I wouldn't want to see that. So yeah, it was quite a big thing. They really, really were, like, it was a proper big manhunt for Bill. At the same time, they were investigating the family, because they had to. You've got to look into the closest people to Bill. And this is where all of their dirty laundry would be aired. And it was not as amicable and happy and as it all seemed. Turned out there was a huge rift in the family. Loathing situation. Angela absolutely hated Richard, the son, Richard the First. And Richard absolutely hated Angela. And they were both incredibly cynical and sceptical about each other. Neither of them wanted the other person to benefit or have more than the other one, sort of thing. Greed. Sadly, this feud between the pair resulted in Richard and Bill, Richard the First, not seeing each other for 3 years. This would have been quite crippling for both of them. They were very, very close, but the whole thing had put so much strain on the family that they just did not speak. 3 years is a long time, and that would only fuel your hatred for that other person even more. When Bill and Angela separated, which may have had something to do with this big feud and all the tension, I don't know, I didn't see that in my research, but when they separated, Richard and Bill, they began to rekindle their relationship again because Angela wasn't standing in the way of it. When police were searching through Harkness Hall, they found a very emotional letter written by Bill to Angela, expressing his feelings towards her, and he never got over their separation. He was desperately unhappy and he really loved her and wanted her back. At this point in the investigation, when they find this emotional letter, thoughts start to lean towards, could Bill have gone off to take his own life? He knows his land very, very well. Is he somewhere that he thinks he's not going to be found and he's gone off? Or he was suffering with arthritis. This was days before his 70th birthday. Perhaps he'd gone off just to clear his head, and perhaps he'd come to some harm. The search for Bill would go on for months, and it was pretty fruitless. There was no more evidence found other than when the grandson found the links to that bracelet. So quite quickly this is turning into a cold case. The police quickly turned the investigation from a missing persons case to a murder inquiry, because even though they didn't have a body, they had conducted proof of life investigations. You have to prove life, and they couldn't. They literally couldn't. So after the 3rd of June, there was no trace, no proof of life for Bill. He never used a credit card, a bank card. He was never seen again. So they did conclude that Bill had died. Just going to take my cardi off. I'm hot. Oh, I've got an injury. I'll tell you. At the end. Injured soul. Bill's family and Richard Lush, they spent the majority of their time searching for Bill, even though the police had told them that they didn't think that Bill was alive. They continued to search. You would. There was nothing to say that he was dead either. So when they weren't working the farm, working the land, they were looking for Bill. They never gave up. And that was in contrast to some other members of Bill's family, mainly Angela and his other sons from his marriage with Angela. It was like they just didn't care. Also, I mean, this is just, what more do you need? But officers would overhear Angela talking about Bill in the past tense, like she knew he was dead. Dun, dun, dun. Here we go, because this is where it gets spicy and you just can't believe it. And then there's a twist and then it's like, oh, what? But okay, here we are. In their investigations, the officers did not forget about the arson attack on the Land Rover Jeep in the barn. So they had a separate investigation going for that case separately. And lo and behold, they linked one of Bill's own farmhands to this arson attack. Ooh. He was called Paul Cannon. Oh my lord, this gin is going down too well. I'm so sorry, because I feel squiffy a little bit. Oh, drunk Sophie. Enjoy. Hold on to your hats. Due to Angela's lack of attention and bothering towards her ex-husband's disappearance, and even though it's her ex-husband, you don't just, it's not a stranger. Like, she just had no bother about it whatsoever, and it was very odd. Very odd. Also, Paul Cannon being connected to this arson attack, that meant that they got warrants to search Angela's home and all of her devices, and Paul Cannon's home and all of his devices too. And can you guess what I'm going to say? The pair of them, the buggers, were having an affair. They were actually having an affair. So although Angela and Bill had separated, through all of these, and I'm not joking when I say thousands, 28,000 messages. And they weren't on the phone, no, because Paul had deleted them. Or so he thought. He deleted them off of WhatsApp or whatever, but they remained, I don't know, it's very clever. But the police managed to get these messages, 28,000. I mean, someone's got to read through all that crap as well. And loads of it was probably just crap. But anyway, so yes, they were having an affair while Bill and Angela were still together, not separated yet, and it was ongoing and cringy at times. In the early messages, they are mainly sexual, and they often discussed the fact that Bill just wouldn't divorce Angela, that he wouldn't agree to it. So they were really frustrated with that. But having an affair and even setting someone's car on fire doesn't mean that you have horrifically murdered them. So the police had to do even more investigations, and they kept on going through these thousands of text messages. The police discovered through witnesses, actually, so through just good old-fashioned police work, talking to the people in the community and the farm workers, they discovered that Paul Cannon, he had a Suzuki Jeep type car thing. I'm not very good with cars. It was a Suzuki, I know that. And that on the day after Bill had gone missing, Paul immediately started trying to sell this Suzuki. Not suspicious at all then. The police managed to track down this vehicle, and it was in Bulgaria. Random? How random's that? So it was in Bulgaria. They managed to seize the vehicle, they bring it back to the UK, and they do lots of forensic tests, but it's changed hands, it's gone on a holiday, it's in Bulgaria, it's probably been cleaned a number of times, and they just had no forensic evidence from the Suzuki whatsoever. This whole situation led the police to believe that Bill had been murdered by Paul or Angela or both on the 3rd of June. So that evening, sometime after his grandson left after 9 o'clock, after he'd eaten his roast dinner. They then believe that Paul Cannon used his Suzuki car, Jeep, to get rid of Bill's body, and then he swiftly tried to sell that vehicle. Because of the timing of this text I'm going to read out, I kind of think that he was murdered after midnight. Let me read it. It's at 11:30, 11:36, and he says, "I'm just watching Kill Bill 2. And Angela replies, "1 would be enough." Now, would be enough suggests that he's not dead yet, doesn't it? Otherwise you'd put 1's enough, wouldn't you? I don't know. Anyway, so to me, I don't know, was there a phone call after that when they were like, should we do it tonight? Blah, blah, blah. We just don't know. But I think that it happened after that. That's just my speculation. Paul Cannon, Angela and her 2 sons were arrested. They were all arrested. So they must have had some feeling that her sons had something to do with it as well. Probably their behaviour, because they also didn't seem all that arsed about their dad. And in their interviews, you guessed it, no comment, no comment, no comment, all that business. So they just didn't say a word. They never answered a question. It was all looking set to be quite a straightforward case, even though they hadn't found poor Bill's body. The prosecution felt like they had a strong case, strong enough to go ahead without a body. And then there is a spanner in the works, because on the 10th of February, before the trial, Bill's body is discovered. And his body tells a different story to murder, purely by chance. A local fisherman is looking for somewhere to fish or something, and he stumbles onto private land. He doesn't realise it at the time, but it's actually owned by Angela. Okay, so not looking good for Angela at this point here, because Bill's on her land, but he finds poor Bill. Bill was waist deep in thick mud, and he's still wearing his overalls, he's still wearing his wellies, and he's bent over, so he's waist deep. He's waist deep in the mud, and then the top of him's like that. So he's slumped over, so his face is in the mud. And the things that are found around his body suggest an accident. There's a bottle of Bailey's, a half-eaten corn on the cob, some lengths of rope, which made people think at the time that he'd gone to hurt himself. They also found near him a teacup from his house. The discovery of Bill really threw a spanner in the works for the murder charge, because it really did seem like he'd wandered off. So the investigating officer, when they found his body, they called the pathologist, the man that was going to do the autopsy. They wanted him at the scene because they wanted to see Bill exactly how he was found. Good frickin' call, because the pathologist was able to see Bill exactly how he had been found, and then in his autopsy he was able to prove that Bill had been put into that mud after he was dead. He hadn't ingested any of the water, any of the mud, so he was not breathing at all at the time that he was in the mud and slumped over, and that would not have been the case if he was alive. It was suggested that he was like fireman carried and then dropped into the mud. In the autopsy, they also found that one of the small neck vertebrae was broken, and that's really common with strangulation. The trial would go ahead. Obviously now they do have Bill's body, but the WhatsApp messages, they just proved too much. As the police had investigated and gone further and further through these thousands of messages, they discovered a plot. They called it Plan B between the pair of them. And there was also another fella involved, and actually he was taken to trial as well. He was like a hired killer is what I'm looking for, Sophie, a hired killer. The pair of them would discuss frequently their Plan B, which was the plan to kill Bill. Safe, I couldn't say that any other way. Ultimately, they talked at length about hurting Bill, how they would go about it, blah, 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 just rank. Imagine reading those messages. And Angela said that, well, they both did. They said it was just sexual. It's like sexual fantasy. Each to their own, but what? You know, she said, we just did that because it got us both off. We just talked about it because it just got us... Shut up, Angela. Angela's two sons and the murder for hire man, they weren't charged, but Angela and Paul, they were found guilty and they were sentenced to 22 years, a minimum of 22 years in prison. The judge really strongly believed from all of the evidence and all of these text messages that Angela was the person behind this murder, the person goading Paul on, and that Paul was the person that committed the murder and then disposed of Bill's body. The general consensus was that on the evening of the 3rd of June or the early hours of the 4th of June, somehow Bill was lured out of his house and over to the cowshed, and that is where he was most likely murdered. Hence the bracelet being snapped and broken. There was a struggle, and then his body was moved, dumped on Angela's land in the mud pit, for want of a better phrase. And then the following day he sold the car. I really struggle with this one because, with the why, because it wasn't money. She was really wealthy. He'd handed over 2 farms, loads of land. She had a house. It wasn't money. It wasn't money orientated. She wasn't going to benefit. So and they were separated. So it just seems, why did they? I honestly don't know with that one. It wasn't like they could. I don't know. It's just beyond me that. Just let him be. Also, she just put her own children through. What? She knowingly took her children's father away. Although, there is a part of me, so I watched a documentary about this, and one of her sons, Bill and her, their sons, was in the documentary. I don't know, my heckles were up. It was a little bit like I think he knew more than he was letting on. Sounds like Angela was a bit of a mastermind, a bit manipulative. And a lot. Maybe she had her boys under her spell as well, and they knew more than they let on. Nevertheless, she did have their dad killed. Richard Lush, so Bill's best friend, he said that the funeral was packed, so packed, and that made him quite emotional. And Richard, his son, Richard I, he said that he wants to continue running the farms and the land the way that his dad did. He was quite eco-friendly with the farms and had really good animal care, and he says that he's just going to carry forward his dad's legacy in how he continues their business, and that's really sweet as well. And that is all I have for you on today's case. I almost feel like there's something I've missed out of that one, but I think no, just got to try a brain. Before I go, I am going to share with you what happened, why I'm injured. I can't show you, it's quite epic, but I can't show you because it would mean taking my trousers off. That is a different sort of video. So I'll tell you, I've basically got a big old steam burn, and I did it to myself, and it is so stupid because this is how tired my brain is, right? I need a holiday. I work for a charity, and part of that work involves me loading clothes onto online. So I have to take photos of the clothes and I have to make sure they look nice. So I steam them. I don't like ironing, it makes me sad. So I got this steamer and I think it's brilliant. So I had a pair of trousers hanging up on a hook and I'm holding one end and I'm using my steamer like this. And I noticed that I hadn't used the steamer for like a week and it must have got dust on it on the top bit. So as I went like that on the trousers, there was like a dust and I was like, oh, so I wiped it off the trousers carefully. And then I looked at the thing and I was like, oh yeah, there is dust on it. And I wiped it. It was on the steam. It was steaming. I wiped it on my leg. What an idiot. Oh my God. Literally, as I did it, I was like, oh my God. Like, you know, when it's just too late and you've committed to your stupidness. Oh, so I rushed straight to the bathroom because it was so painful. And like where it is, it was like, how do you like pour? I struggled. And then I just had a cold compress on it. And now today, it was so sore yesterday because it was steam as well. Steam is awful. It just stings for so long, doesn't it? Like the minute you take the cold thing off, it's like, yeah. Oh, it was just so bad. And I had to sit in my underpants the whole day, other than when I got the kids from school. That would not be fun. And yeah, and then at bedtime, it was a pain because I kept not being able to like sleep on that side. But today it's not sore, but today it looks terrible. And I'm scared that I'm going to catch it and it's going to like... Anyway, so that's the situation with the leg, because there's always something that's got to happen, isn't there? Always. But then the day ended nicely because it was pancake day. So Paul made pancakes. I ate pancakes. It was a good day. Anywho, so that was this week's catastrophes. And thankfully I had a delicious gin today. Too delicious because I drank it really quick, I think. And it's just so nice. It makes me want more. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Sin and Tonic. Hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a glass or a vase or a jug or a mug of gin. Thank you as always for all of your lovely comments, your support, your kindness, your funniness, because a lot of the comments do have me in stitches and I love that. And also your subscriptions, because, what a weird way of saying it, and your subscriptions. Because we are now at like I think as of today it's 711. 711! We don't have that here. We have, I don't think there's an alternative Spa. I don't know. What do we have, Londis? Like what's the 7-Eleven? Here, they're just like shops like that. Sophie, irrelevant. Anyway, yeah, 7-Eleven. Oh, that's so exciting. I am getting excited. Also a little scared because Paul and I have done a lot of the talky and not a lot of the actual action for Patreon and merch. So we're going to get going on that. But anyway, waffle, 7-Eleven, baby. So yeah, thank you so much. And I will see you all next week and I love you loads. La, 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 la. Bye.